but the Israeli Prime Minister is still being welcomed in Washington. Netanyahu, whose war on Gaza has killed over 13,000 children, will shortly deliver a speech to both houses of Congress. His visit has, though, been met with demonstrations, including the occupation of a building in the Capitol complex by pro-Palestinian protesters. Many of them were Jewish and wearing T-shirts saying, "Jews say stop arming Israel." But within the chamber, Netanyahu will expect rapturous applause from both Republicans and Democrats. There will, though, be one notable absence. Kamala Harris, the Democrats' new presumptive nominee for president, won't preside over the speech. Vice presidents typically preside over joint addresses to Congress, but Harris is instead scheduled to be in Indianapolis on her presidential campaign. To discuss Netanyahu's trip to Washington, I'm joined by Mehdi Hasan, editor-in-chief and CEO at Zeteo News. Thank you so much for joining us again, Mehdi. I suppose to set us off, for a UK audience, why has this leader, under investigation by the ICC, been invited to speak to both houses of Congress? It's sort of considered to be quite the honour. How did this happen?
Well, it's not really Michael, thanks for having me. It's not really the honor anymore for Netanyahu. The guy's a regular guest at Congress. He's been there several times before. He gets a lot of invites. I believe he's been invited more times than most other leaders. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but he's been here a few times before. The short answer to your question is it's a partisan political play by the Republican Party. He was invited by Republican Speaker Mike Johnson to address both houses of Congress. Interesting is that Chuck Schumer, the Democratic majority leader in the Senate, co-signed onto the invite, as did Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House. They didn't really have to. And Schumer's actually on record saying that Netanyahu's an obstacle to peace and he should go. So you've got this weird situation today where Chuck Schumer will be doing photo ops with a guy who he's publicly attacked and said shouldn't be Prime Minister of Israel. That's the bizarro world of American politics and Middle East politics right now. But look, the Republicans wanted him to come. They've tried to make Israel into a wedge issue, say, hey, look, we support Israel. And that means we're not anti-Semitic. Democrats are really bad for the Jews. And all this nonsense right-wing propaganda. And, you know, a lot of Democrats are boycotting today. We'll see if it's a record number. The last time he came and spoke, when he spoke on the Iran nuclear deal and undermined Obama, he's undermined Democratic presidents before standing in the United States Congress. And a lot of Democrats boycotted then, but way more are going to boycott today. In fact, Nancy Pelosi, Michael, is not showing up today. It's not just a bunch of lefties not showing up today. Nancy Pelosi, former speaker, long-standing ally of Israel, cannot stand Netanyahu, is not showing up. Kamala Harris has found a way to get out of having to sit behind him on the podium, which is a smart move for her, the new Democratic presumptive presidential nominee. And then you've got a bunch of lefties, the squad's not going. Bernie Sanders, who of course is Jewish, is also not attending. And not just Bernie Sanders, other senators like Jeff Merkley, Peter Welch of Vermont, they're saying, we're not going. This guy should, Joaquin Castro, who's a very influential Democrat in the House, he's just put out a statement saying Netanyahu should be in front of an international, not Congress. You never heard stuff like that before in Washington, D.C. from members of Congress. So things are changing.
How much should we read into the decision of Kamala Harris not to be there presiding over this, which would mean she'd be sort of one of those two people sitting behind him? So it would be quite a statement to be there. How much should we read into her not being there? Does this suggest she might be tougher on Netanyahu and the Israeli government if she were to replace Joe Biden as president?
That is the $64,000 question, Michael. A lot of us have been asking, can Kamala Harris be better on Biden? Will be better on Gaza than Biden? Will Kamala Harris be better on Gaza than Biden? And look, I'm of the school of thought that says she will be, only because the bar is so low. Biden has been truly atrocious, not just in policy terms, but in rhetorical terms. He hasn't been able to show basic empathy for the Palestinians as a people in a way that Kamala Harris has. She's spoken out quite eloquently and passionately about the humanitarian nightmare in Gaza. Obviously, that nightmare is caused by her administration, so that's a problem. It is not helpful at all to her 3 months out from election, while the base is very anti-Netanyahu, to be seen sitting behind Benjamin Netanyahu as he lies about Gaza, as he defends war crimes in Gaza, and as he probably takes some digs at her administration, at her current boss, Joe Biden. So it's smart not to be there. We shouldn't overread into it. She is having a private meeting with Netanyahu. She's not going to come in and break relations with Benjamin Netanyahu or say, yes, send him to The Hague. Obviously not. Whether you are Democrat, Republican, whether you are moderate, center-right, center-left. In the longer term, as she actually runs for president, if she wins, is she going to come out and say, look, I'll be the first American president to pledge Palestinian statehood on my watch? That would be a big thing to announce. Whether she does it or not, let's see. I think she'll be marginally better than Biden. But as I say, the bar is so low, not something to celebrate.
I mean, were she to sort of say something about Palestinian statehood, that would be very much not in line with her history on this topic. I mean, I was reading about this today. I'm obviously not an expert on Kamala Harris's political career, but as far as I understand it, when she was still a senator for California, she spoke to AIPAC. And one of the things she said in the speech was this big sort of proud defense of her commitment to Israel by saying the first thing she did when she became a senator in California was to co-sponsor a bill which was condemning the United Nations Security Council for itself condemning the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. And for sort of historical context here, this was one of the very few UN Security Council resolutions that the United States didn't veto because Obama thought, you know what, Israel have gone far enough, I'm not going to protect them anymore. So in that sense, Kamala Harris was to the right of Obama, and very much proudly so.
So he was also on his way out the door, Michael, for context. That was, I think, December 2016. He was lame duck president. He abstained. She was very new at the time, obviously. She'd been elected. Look, Senate careers are Senate careers. It's very different to be in the legislature, where you face much more pressure on this issue, than being in the executive. Things change. She's all over the place. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing, Michael. So, for example, when she ran for the Democratic president nomination in 2020, she was supporting Medicare for all, like universal health care, the Bernie Sanders position. She was supporting a Green New Deal. And she kind of trimmed back to the center when she was Biden's running mate. So, you know, she's not an ideologue, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. For the left, it might be, well, you know, she doesn't believe in anything. That's not always a bad thing. If she doesn't believe anything strongly, that's someone who could be lobbied, persuaded. I don't think she's going to come out on Palestinian state or anything else because she suddenly sees the light, justice and peace. I think she's going to do it for one of two reasons. One is because she sees the electoral advantage of doing it. Right now, Joe Biden was on course to lose Michigan, partly because a lot of people in Michigan are Arab American, Muslim American, Black American, young American who don't like the administration's Gaza policy. So if she's smart, she'll do some kind of reset to try and get Michigan back in play. And separately, you know, people who have interviewed her say, just from a human point of view, as a woman of color, as someone who doesn't have Biden's history on this issue, when she's seen the humanitarian situation in Gaza, she's actually been outraged. You know, Joan Walsh of The Nation did a big profile piece on Kamala Harris that's just come out today. I spoke to Joan on Sunday night when the news broke, and she made the point when she spoke to Kamala Harris during her profile, following her around for a few weeks. You know, Kamala Harris was saying, and she's someone who cooks, so she was saying, you know, oh, the Israelis are allowing in flour. Well, flour don't do shit. That was the phrase she used, without clean water. What are we doing about clean water? So there's just some basic humanitarian stuff that we hope engage in that Joe Biden has not bothered to engage in.
And I suppose I can see why, you know, with all due respect, you know, everyone wants Kamala Harris to beat Donald Trump, or most people who are sort of vaguely to the left want Kamala Harris to beat Donald Trump. Yes. And it seems to me that this has sort of led lots of people to say, well, we might as well then give her the benefit of the doubt. And lots of things which were once seen as flaws of Kamala Harris are now being sort of portrayed as sort of positives. So obviously she completely tanked in the primaries back in 2020 because she clearly stood
before a vote was cast.
Well, because she so clearly stood for nothing. And I suppose while I can understand why there is this enthusiasm, right? If you want someone to win the presidency, you might as well just, you know, go all in instead of sort of saying, oh, she's crap, but we'll still vote for her. But I mean, should we also allow a bit more space for sort of realism about this person who doesn't seem to stand for anything? When she gets into the White House, is it really going to be the left she's listening to, or is it going to be Wall Street?
Oh, 100%. And I just shared a piece. I'm one of these people saying she'll be better than Biden on Gaza, but I also just shared a piece from Politico today, which suggests she won't be. She'll be awful on Gaza. No one knows until let's see what she does. We can only read the kind of runes of what's out there. And what's out there so far is better than Biden. Again, low bar, Michael. I keep adding the caveat. Better than Biden, yes. Low bar, Biden. But look, the timeline matters too, right, Michael? We are end of July. I wish we were having this conversation a year ago. I wish we could, quote unquote, vet these candidates better and go through, you know, have an actual debate and get Kamala Harris's views in long policy interviews. We are where we are, right? You call it a coronation, call it a kind of replacement. She has taken the candidacy. She's actually done it super efficiently. I was one of the people who was saying Biden should step aside, Kamala should take over. I wrote that early July for The Guardian, got attacked for it by lots of Biden loyalists. What's funny is how everyone has just got behind her. We were told there would be a civil war, there would be a broken convention, Democrats would be annoyed. Biden, no, it actually happened very smoothly on a Sunday afternoon. Ruined my weekend because I had to work all weekend, but it was super smooth, right? He came out, he said he's quitting the race. 20 minutes later, he put out a tweet endorsing Kamala. The Clintons came out straight away. And then a bunch of senators, House members, governors all fell in line. She raised $81 million in 24 hours, more than any politician in American history has raised in 24 hours. 30,000 people signed up to knock on doors for the Democrats on day one. That is not something to be kind of, sneered at, dismissed. That's pretty huge at a time when Biden was just crashing in the polls. There was no energy or enthusiasm. Trump had all the momentum. And now Trump is shitting his pants, saying he won't debate her unless it's on Fox, coming up with stupid nicknames that don't stick, like Laughing Kamala, which make her sound cool. The Republicans are all over the place. So, yeah, as someone who's anti-fascist and anti-Trump, I'm quite amused to see how they're melting down in the face of a younger, more eloquent, more energetic candidate. Again, the bar is so low.
Yeah, I mean, the way that she sort of has entered the race, I think, has played to her strengths, because basically one of the, she's young and relatively articulate. So sort of if she had been up against other relatively articulate people who actually believed in stuff, maybe it would have been difficult. But she's clearly younger than Joe Biden. And the biggest problem everyone had with Joe Biden was that he was very, very old.
Michael, this is what I keep saying. Like, you and I, we get paid to talk about this stuff. It's actually not that complicated. Millions of Americans told pollsters again and again for months, we don't like these two guys. We don't want these two guys on the ticket. We don't want Trump Biden the sequel. Anyone but these two. And neither party listened. And funnily enough, Michael, Nikki Haley, former Republican rival of Trump, who's now bent the knee like everyone else, she said a few months ago, a great quote. She said, whichever party looks at the polls and gets rid of that old guy at the top of the ticket will win. Great prediction. I hope she's right. But that's all you needed to do was slightly just nudge Biden off the scene. And suddenly you get all these Americans going, wow, we get a choice. Here's a statistic for viewers in the UK. There has not been a presidential election since the mid-1970s that did not have a Bush, Clinton, or Biden on the ticket. That's insane.
Yeah, hopefully, I mean, in 4 years' time, we could be sort of saying the same thing, but just adding Trump to it, and then you can sort of just make it longer and longer and longer. Final question. So when Joe Biden was the candidate and before the debate, so obviously after that disastrous debate, just everything turned to his age and will he drop out? Before that, the big concern of Democratic strategists seemed to be that sort of the election campaign would be derailed by Palestine protesters turning up at various Biden speeches and sort of calling him Genocide Joe or changing the conversation to being about Gaza. Do you think that with Harris as the nominee, that's still going to be happening? Or do you think sort of people will give her the benefit of the doubt because she has some distance from the policy decisions of the White House over the past year?
It's a great question. I think we'll wait and see what happens in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention. There were huge protests planned. I still think you'll get protests. There are people who say she's as tainted by it as anyone else. It's the Biden-Harris administration. She's the vice president in the same government that sold all these weapons. But interestingly, Americans are actually a very forgiving bunch, quite an amnesiac bunch. And if you look at the polling on the economy, for example, there's polling out this week, Michael, that shows that Americans don't blame her for inflation, which is hilarious because that was a big, more than his age. The thing that actually hurt Biden early on was the inflation issue last year, which was pinned solely around his neck. But it's interesting not being pinned around Kamala Harris's neck. So I wonder on Gaza whether there is that sense of, well, she's someone new and different. I've spoken to folks of the uncommitted movement, Michael. These are people who voted uncommitted in the primaries, not for Biden Democrats, who said, look, we're holding back our support until we see a change of policy on Gaza. They're saying to me, look, we're willing to give it the benefit of that, but we need to see policy change. Rhetoric is not enough. We will still be lobbying for an arms embargo at the DNC. But look, the personal hatred for Joe Biden from people who care strongly about Gaza, that has been dealt with in a way. Like, it was Genocide Joe, right? It wasn't Genocide Democrats. It was Abandon Biden was the campaign in Michigan, not Abandon Democrats. So a lot of it was centered, rightly or wrongly, around the figure, the person of the president. And by moving him off the scene, Democrats do get a chance, at least, what's the phrase, permission to be heard again on this issue. What she does with it, well, let's see.